All right, everybody. So I've got a very interesting video for you guys today, and I'm gonna start by going out on a limb here and saying that I don't know a whole lot about investment banking, M&A, which is short for mergers and acquisitions, or hostile takeovers or friendly takeovers. So I've worked closely with a lot of people that did this. I never did this personally, hands-on, never worked in iBanking, but I've done consulting for these iBanking teams. I have some iBanking friends. I did training, coaching for these types of people on various levels at different points in my career. So I kind of know the ins and outs, but I don't know all the day to day. So I will confess, I'll admit that straight up right at the beginning here. I know generally how it works, but what I'm going to try to do is take a stab at this and try to use some machine learning principles and data science strategies to try to estimate what kind of synergies we can get from doing a merger between two companies. So, two big companies, Apple and Tesla. This is what I picked. I think they have some overlap. They're very different companies. Apple is far more cash rich, much more um, way bigger market share, much overall more wealthy than Tesla. But Tesla could be a potential target for a takeover, I think, or for a merger, maybe not target, but for a merger between these two companies because this is my hypothesis, and I could be wrong. You guys can correct me in the comments. Like I'll admit, um, I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm going to take a stab at this and try to do the best I can. I'll try to do justice to this thing. But my hypothesis generally is Apple needs batteries for its iPhones, for its laptops, for everything that it makes, right? Everything runs on batteries that Apple produces. And for Tesla, it's the same thing. They'll run on batteries, okay? So this is, um, like I'm putting myself in a vulnerable spot here, okay? Because I don't know all the details here, but I would assume, I'm going to try to prove that Apple could take over Tesla and the synergies that these two enterprises create is going to be worth more than either one standing on its own because of the batteries, right? Like Tesla is very dependent on batteries for its cars. Apple's very dependent on batteries for its laptops, for its iPhones, and for everything else that comes from the world of Apple. Okay, so let me pause right here and just take a quick look and say, what is M&A in 10 steps? Okay, you develop an acquisition strategy, set up the search criteria, you're searching for a partner or takeover candidate, search for potential acquisition targets, begin acquisition planning, perform valuation analysis, negotiations. So that is face to face or over the phone, WebEx, whatever you want, right? There's nothing quantitative or analytical about that. Due diligence, that's all the legal uh, jargon, make sure everything's in good shape. Purchase and sales contract, financial strategy for the acquisition could be cash, could be issuing debt, closing, and integrating the acquisition at the end. Okay, so we are going to try to satisfy these conditions right here, 2 through 5. So that's 4 of 10. If we can do 40% of what's required for this M&A process and make it quick and easy, I'm willing to bet it's worth the effort here. Just because I know iBankers spend a ton of time working on these deals, brokering deals, negotiating, valuing. I think valuation, appraisal, all the forecasting, discounting stuff takes a long time. I think it's meticulous. Um, Attention to detail is paramount, and it just takes a lot of time. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think probably part one, um, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 is probably a little more straightforward, less intense, less computational um, investment. So I'm going to try to use my knowledge of data science, machine learning, deep learning. We don't really have any AI in this example. AI would be an interesting angle to introduce to this, but we're going to try to do these things right here using just Python code and some logic. So we have Python's income statement right here. Here's the income statement, big three or income statement, balance sheet, okay, and cash flow statement. So cash flow is all the investing, financing, and operating cash flows. Okay, I have a whole video on this that explains how this stuff works. You can see operating, investing, financing. The balance sheet is all the assets, liabilities, and the debt that Apple owns. And here's the income statement. So this is the income that Apple generates throughout the course of the year. This is in millions. So you multiply this by 1,000. You can see this is all in thousands. So $391 billion in revenue. That's a lot of revenue, guys. On Tesla side, 97 billion in revenue. So, like I said, Apple is the big boy here. These guys are kind of like small players, right? 97 billion in revenue versus 391 billion. So Apple could easily acquire Tesla. Tesla could be the target, and I that's my hypothesis just for the batteries. Okay, I'm just focusing on the batteries, and let's take a quick look, dive in, and see how this thing potentially could play out. And again, I would encourage you in the comments, um, tell me, am I wrong? Am I not wrong? Is there areas to improve? I'm almost certain there is. Is there ways to make this better, more efficient, more streamlined, more accurate, more precise? Let me know about that. Okay, let me know about these things, and if I get some good feedback, I can, take another swing at this thing and come back maybe in a few weeks and try to make some improvements. This is just my first crack at it right here, so let's take a look and see how it goes. So business has grown two ways: organically, right, by just growing the business naturally, or through mergers and acquisitions. You buy out your competitor or buy out a smaller entity, merge that into yours, and all of a sudden you can double or triple your revenue overnight, right? And even a smaller company can buy a bigger. Like Target could be a bigger company; it doesn't have to be smaller. It can go two ways, right? So mergers and acquisitions aren't just a way to reduce the pool of competitors, but there's a strategic advantage, right? It's basically synergy. I remember in the 1990s, synergy was actually a bad word. It was like a not really a cuss word, but almost a cuss word. But in the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, it's really a very prominent, high-profile word. So that's what we're going to look at, the synergy between these two companies, right? And you look for commonalities or maybe discrepancies. Maybe one company is very proficient at one thing, maybe the other company is proficient at something else, and together you can be proficient at two major things, right? And really dominate the space that you operate in. So that's another consideration. In some instances, acquisitions are approved by the leadership of both companies. Sometimes there's a hostile takeover, right? Sometimes there's a friendly takeover. So if it's friendly, both companies or both parties acquiesce. If it's a hostile takeover, one doesn't want the other to take it over. And again, the takeover candidate could be the bigger company or the smaller company. It could go both ways. Usually, though, I think it's the bigger taking over the smaller, but it could be the other way around, right? So there's things that we're going to look at: revenue, EBITDA, debt, equity. We don't actually have debt and equity in this analysis, but that would come from the balance sheet. Um, so that could be another type of analysis, and we could incorporate that too. All I'm doing in the first iteration here, this is the first phase. I'm just looking at the income statement. If we wanted the um, total debt here for Apple is 106 billion. Where's equity? Net debt. Oh yeah, here's it's 56 billion, and assets 364. So most of those assets, assets equal liability plus equity, right? That's how we get that. So that would be another angle to look at the cash flows and the synergies there, and the balance sheet and the synergies. But we're just looking at income statement right now today. Okay, so let's move on here. Um, so we have revenue, EBITDA, we have that. That would be on the balance sheet. That's balance sheet, that's balance sheet, balance sheet. So there's definitely some room for improvement. If the first iteration here goes well, we can swing back and take another look at this and try to tighten it up a little bit. But I think for the first round, I think we're starting off in a good spot in the right direction. So this takes a little while to run. I'm not going to refresh it, but if you run this code right here, it will go ahead, open a new browser window, go to that URL, and it's going to parse out all of the financial data from this income statement. So the first thing I told the code to do is expand all. This is not expanded. If I hit this button right here, this is expanded, right? This would be collapsed. This would be collapsed. This would be collapsed. And if you hit this button, expand all, those are collapsed. If I hit expand all, then it's expanded. So that's what this is doing. I'm looking for this button. I'm telling the code, look for this text right here, expand all. And if I actually go over here, I'm not going to get into the whole screen scraping thing. I have a few videos on screen scraping specifically, so you can see how that works. But if you right click and hit inspect, it's going to take you to the code behind the page. And if I go here, inspect, it's going to take me right to that spot. And if you look here, collapse all, if I hit this button, you see expand all. It takes a second to refresh. Okay, there it is right there. See expand all if I put the mouse over it. Hopefully you can see it. Expand all. It's on the kind of the middle portion of the page right there, and those two arrow brackets. This is a span class. So if you look for that code in the HTML, you can click on that button and tell Selenium, this is a Selenium WebDriver, that's what we're using, to go ahead, click the button, and then everything's expanded, and then we're going to look for all the row and rows, all the columns and columns. So these are rows, total revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit. I'm highlighting the rows, and these are the columns too, right? So breakdown, these are the columns over here, these are the rows. So I'm saying for every row, for every column, go ahead and scrape it, put it into a list. Everything with square brackets is a list. I'm doing list.append row data. So appending all the rows to this list, convert the list to a data frame. That's what this says here. And then we have breakdown TTM 1, 2, 3 years ago. It had a problem getting the headers, so I just assigned the headers. I said, this gave me TTM, trailing 12 months last quarter, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We have total revenue, 391 billion, 391, 383, 394, 365. We look over here, 391, 391, 383, 394, 365. Okay, so we got everything. And we go down to Tesla. So there's Tesla, same thing. Breakdown TTM last quarter, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And if we look at Tesla, 97 bill, 96, 81, 53, 31. We go over here, 91, 96, 81, 53, 31 billion. Okay, so we got everything at 2 data frames. Here's the columns. I'm printing that out. And here's the tail of the data. So if I go down to Apple, yeah, that's the tail, 13461,000. We go on here, 13461,000. Got it. And for Tesla, it looks like negative 142,170. Go down here, 142,170 negative. Okay, so we got everything. So we're in good shape. So moving on, we're going to remove all the commas, clean this up. We're going to refine it. Anything that has a double hyphen in there, these have double hyphens. If you look close, that's really nothing, and that's going to screw up our analysis if we try to do some type of calculation, because that's actually a string. 2 hyphens is actually a string, it's not a number. Well, you want to see a 0. So this 0 is fine. That's totally fine. This is nothing. I have to clean that up. So I'm going to just go ahead and tell Python anything that needs cleaning, just go ahead and clean it and fill it with a 0. Okay, this is refining the data. And we are going to go ahead, I have some notes over here, extract matching line items. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is look at the breakdown for all these columns. Okay, this is called breakdown column. Okay, anything that matches here, total revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit, in the breakdown column, I want to consolidate that. Okay, so here's breakdown, total revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit. So I'm telling the code anything with a breakdown in this column, go ahead and combine that and take the TTM, trailing 12 months, for Apple cash flow and for Tesla cash flow, and combine that into a new column called combined. That's what we see here, combined. So we have the name of the line item. We have Apple TTM and Tesla. We're going to combine that just by a simple addition. Very simple, very straightforward. We're not doing anything sexy here. Synergy benefit is Apple minus Tesla. So Apple is the big guy. These are the small guys. Is there synergies? This just means that there's more total revenue for Apple than Tesla, more operating revenue, more cost of revenue, gross profit for Apple versus Tesla. So these are all positive. That's what I'd expect. Apple is bigger. This is actually negative here. So interest expense. So basically that means that Apple's not paying any interest on its debt, and Tesla is paying interest because it's floated debt, has to pay interest payments. That's fine. Doesn't really matter. I just want to consolidate everything together and match all of these TTMs for each line item here based on the breakdown. So we're doing kind of like a VLOOKUP if you're using Excel and getting the equivalent number for these two, okay? Now we're looking at the specific format, so it's a little easier to read. This has scientific notation, so I know 0.08 or 10 to the power of 8, 10 to the power of 6, 10 to the power of 7, 8, 6 to the power of 6. These are bigger numbers, but it's a little bit hard to say exactly what is that number, so I'm just going to change the format. This is 2329388 to the power of 8, but what is that really? That is 293 billion. Remember, this is in thousands. So this is just easier to read. I'm applying the format. Combined with Synergy is 782 billion. Over here we have 7.82 to the power of 10 to the 8th. Okay, I think this is just a little bit easier to read, and so I'm just making it human readable over here. Now, let's start with the analysis. Okay, are there any synergies between these two companies? Let's try to figure it out. Synergies refer to potential benefits that companies can achieve by combining their operations. So again, so if Apple does something very efficient and Tesla can benefit from that, maybe Apple can share um, its what IP, intellectual property, or just intellect with Tesla, and vice versa. If Tesla does something or a couple of things absolutely best in class and Apple is far behind, Tesla can share that with Apple once these two companies merge together. Okay, so I'm assuming there's going to be some synergies. Let's find out. We have to understand if there's a strategic fit, a market position for innovation, spelled innovation wrong, and I don't think we need a capital P there. When we get that straightened out, have to understand the financial health of each enterprise, strategic decision of each. How's the market going to react? Is it going to be positive or negative? We have to do some fundamental financial analysis. We have to look at the potential mergers and acquisitions using predictive modeling. Can we leverage clustering, algorithms, supervised learning, time series analysis, so on and so forth? That's something that needs to be looked into. So again, we're going to try to take a more machine learning, data science, um, almost AI. This is quasi AI. I'm not using AI per se. That might be a good exercise for another day. I didn't really introduce AI into this analysis, but that might be worthwhile. But we're going to try to take more of a strategic data science slash machine learning approach to doing these evaluations and seeing if there's potential synergies that could exist here. So now we're going to assign some weighted averages here. Apple is the big guy here. Tesla is a little bit smaller. So we're just going to take everything that has Apple cash flow and multiply that by 0.6. So we're going to give a higher weighting to Apple and slowly lower weighting to Tesla. All things considered, I think it's totally fine in this case. Okay, and then after we take the weightings, we're going to subtract the TTM from the bigger, or subtract the smaller from the bigger. Okay, this is what we end up with here. So we have the combined TTMs and synergy benefits and combined with synergy over here. And then we're going to look at the cash flows, multiply these two together, and then take the log of these two cash flows. Okay, so anytime you have data sets that are not exactly matching or not really relatively on the same scale, you can normalize it, you can standardize it, or you can take the log of these scales. And when you take the log form of these scales, it's going to make these more more apples to apples comparison. Okay, so you're comparing Apple cash flows to the log of Apple cash flows to the log of Tesla cash flows. That makes sense. If you compare Apple cash flows straight up to straightforward Tesla cash flows, that might not make sense because the scale is going to be different. We're trying to get these on the same scale. Okay, so this highlights some synergistic potential benefits to doing a merger of these two companies. Right, we're looking at the trailing 12 months to see, is there a big impact of synergy? Is there a big potential opportunity for synergy? Is there a small potential? And we're going to model any interactions based on the combined effects of these two companies. That's what we're looking at now. So here's the first machine learning approach. We have the TTM for Apple, for Tesla, and then the synergistic benefits. We're going to do a little cleaning here. We're going to set these as the independent variables and the synergy benefit as the dependent. So I've got a bunch of data science videos that describe the X and Y variables here. Basically, the X is the independent variable. So these won't change. I want to see what kind of statistical impact the independent has on the dependent. So Y is dependent on X. X is independent. So X can be anything in the world. It doesn't matter. Y has to be dependent on X. So if X goes up or goes down, Y will go up or go down. Y is dependent on X. Okay, that's all you have to know for this scenario. And we're going to do a random forest regression model and see how close these two match. We're going to look at the R squared. The R squared is the coefficient of determination. We're looking at something statistically significant. Significant would be 0.7 and higher. We'd like to see higher, like 0.9, 0.95, 0.99. That would be great. If it's above 0.7, it's statistically significant, and there is a benefit to combining these two companies based on TTM and looking at the synergies between those two companies combined. So here we see TTM Apple and Tesla, first two columns, synergy benefit. This is a fifth column, sorry, fifth column. So here's an independent variable, here's an independent variable, two of them. There's a dependent variable. Is there any statistical relationship between those? 0.97. So pretty high, guys, pretty high between combining the TTM um, revenues. What was it? TTM is everything, right? It's just a trailing 12 months. So revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit, other income, tax provisions, everything in the first column is a TTM. All of these are highly correlated, 2.97%, so statistically significant. Let's look at some economic and financial ratios. We are going to extract total revenue for both companies. So here's revenue for Apple, here's for Tesla, and we have the gross profit, operating expense, TTM. Cleanup, we're looking at matching items and synergy benefit, right? So this is the data frame, this is the column name right here, and we're going to display the head of this. The head by default shows the first 5 rows, so 0 through 4, 0 based starts with 0, goes to 4. This is really 5, this is 1 in the real world, but in the Python world, this is 1 and this is 5. It's really 0 through 4. So this calculates a combined EBITDA margin. So we have gross profit, operating profit for the two, gross profit, operating profit again, and TTM for both companies. And then we have the synergy benefit right here. So we're looking good, right? And 0.97 R squared between the two. So we're in good shape here. I think this merger is making sense so far. Let's try another approach, game theory based approach. This is what data science is, right? We try a bunch of hypotheses because we don't know what to expect. We don't know what's true. We don't know what's not true. We have to create a hypothesis that basically, in this case, is these two companies are going to benefit from a merger, right? The synergies created are going to outweigh any kind of destruction of capital. We are looking for creation of capital, right? Or creation of wealth or creation of net worth or creation of synergies. Um, it might destroy some capital, but in the end, I believe it's going to create a lot more capital opportunities than it's going to destroy. So this is another hypothesis that we're going to examine. We looked at one right here, economic ratios. Are we better off? Yes or no? Yes, we're better off. We're looking at machine learning models right here. So 2 successful experiments. Let's see if this experiment is successful. Remember, data science is running experiments, checking the outcome and seeing what that is. Before we run the experiment, I don't know what's going to happen. After we run it, we can check it and see if it matches our hypothesis. So we do the game theory analysis right here and come out with Shapley values. Shapley basically shows you the inner workings of a model. A model can be confusing, it can be complicated, it's a black box, but it's going to show us the values of these two companies. Okay, Shapley value for each player, in this case, Apple and Tesla, quantifies their marginal contributions to all possible correlations, which is a combination of these two, right? The merger and the acquisition. But their contribution depends on the order in which they join the coalition. That's what game theory is about, okay? So in this example, the contributions dictionary represents the revenue or cash flows from Apple and Tesla. The company's contributions is based on its TTM, trailing 12 months, value for cash flow, and the cash flow of Apple and cash flow of Tesla. The weighted marginal contributions are summed for each player, giving the final Shapley value. So we have positive Apple, positive Tesla. So in this case, we created value, did not destroy capital. So this merger, again, after 3 iterations of 3 different experiments, still makes sense. Scenario analysis. You can do scenario or simulation analysis. Scenario is combining a couple different broader scenarios together and see if these make sense. Simulation is trying iterations over and over and over and over, maybe 10,000 or 100,000 iterations of a simulation and seeing what the outcome is. So simulation analysis is sometimes referred to as Monte Carlo simulation. The scenario analysis is more like big picture, like 1, 2, 3 scenarios, and then we'll compare those. Okay, so we have an optimistic combined scenario. We're multiplying cash flows by 1.1, so 10% gain in TTM line items, 1.2% gain, or 120% gain for the Tesla side. This is 110% on the Apple side. Okay, and then this is the optimistic and the downturn. We're taking a 20% haircut, and here is 70% haircut or 70% discount and 80% discount. And what effect will that have? So here's the optimistic scenario. We'll assume Apple will grow by 10%, Tesla by 20%. The optimistic combined calculation is applied to these growth rates, and this represents an optimistic scenario. So combined with synergy, predicted synergy benefits. So these are all positive, combined with EBITDA margins, again, positive, optimistic mind. Downturn combined, still positive. So even the worst case scenario that we anticipate here, still positive. So still makes sense to do this merger. So here, I think it's the fifth. I think this is up to the fifth hypothesis now that we're experimenting with, align the data frames based on their index. So we're aligning Apple and Tesla and doing an inner join. There's a couple ways to do this, right? So we're joining these two together, looking at the trailing 12 months and the correlation between these two. Again, looking at the Apple TTM, Tesla TTM, and here we say the two data frames based on indexes of each, and the index is basically just the row count. So this is the index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. They all have the same index because these line up, right? All of these line up with revenue, cost of revenue, gross profit, operating income. Over here, revenue, gross profit, operating expense, operating income. So those are the indexes. We're matching on those. And we're looking at the synergy between the two companies by adjusting, by considering their correlations, right? And the higher the correlation indicates a stronger relationship. So here we saw an R squared of 0.97, so very high R squared. That's what we have here. The adjusted R squared is slightly less, so always be equal to the R squared or slightly less. In this case, it's a little bit less. That's pretty normal. And here we have a correlation of 0.71, so anything over 0.70 is considered statistically significant. So the statistical analysis that we did on these two data frames shows that there is a positive significant correlation to doing the merger. So again, we get another green flag. We get a green light. We can go forward with this so far based on the analysis that we did. Was this number 5, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's economic, and then 5, right? This is the first machine learning. So we did 5 different analyses, right? Let's skip down here. So 5 different experiments, all positive outcomes. We have 5 green lights here, all green flags. We should move forward with this merger. Let me go ahead and create a couple graphs here. This is no machine learning, no forecasting. This is just historical breakdown of revenue and cost right here. So we can see total revenue 391, Tesla 97, and we go back here, we can see this 391, right? So this is just a visual plot of all the line items on the income statement here. And then the breakdowns here, we can see down here, expenses 267 million. If we go down here, expense 267. So it's just a visual plot of all the data that we see here. Expense, total expense 88 million. Oh, sorry, billion. Misspoke. 88 billion. And it's so small, I think it's falling off the chart here. I don't see it. We can zoom in, maybe. No, there's actually nothing there. So small, it's not even being depicted here. Looks like it should be something though. Total expense or, well, for whatever reason, it's not plotting. Okay, but we see, like, definitely Apple's the big brother here, and Tesla is the small little guy, right? So a giant, like, what is it, David and Goliath kind of thing here. Line plot for adjusted synergy. So here's the original synergy, adjusted synergy. So we're definitely creating synergy here on these different line items. So the biggest synergy is operating revenues. Kind of goes down a little bit, but we still have positive synergy, nothing negative here. Spikes up a little bit for total operating income and spikes up quite a bit for EBIT. So synergies between EBIT, earnings before interest and tax. And what was the actual synergy there? EBIT is hard to see. 1.54 times 10 to the, should have made this red, I guess, maybe yellow or orange, but pretty big gain on EBIT with the synergies here. If we go down here to EBIT, 123, and EBIT here is 8. 123 plus 8 is what? 131, I guess, billion. And this thing is saying 154. So yeah. So if you add them together, 131, but the synergies of 154. So EBIT definitely gets a boost from the synergies that we've created here. Here's a scatter plot with regression line. So the scatter plot are all the Tesla TTM line items here. You know what? I should have done this a little bit better. I apologize. Like, I don't have the details. I just have the numerics here. There should be like which line item this is, 123 to 88. Let me see if I can get that real quick. 123, that's probably this guy right here. Total operating income. Total operating 88, total operating income. Oh, maybe it's total expense. Total expense. 123 to 88. Yeah, since I don't have the details here, this could be done better because I'm looking for the line item. All I see is the number. You know what? I apologize for that. I will put the line item. I'll go back before I save this. Here, I'll make the change and get those line items so you can see what's plotted because 123 and 88 million, probably billion. This is probably billion. Let me clean this up a little bit before I post this. I'll clean that. I owe that to you guys. Sorry, I dropped the ball there. But you can see the regression line goes in the diagonal here. The closer these data points are to the regression line, the better the fit. So this is fitting somewhat here, but we have some outliers, so it's not by any means a really good fit. It is kind of fitting down here on these lower data points. It's pretty close to the red line. You want these blue dots closer and closer to the red line to have a more meaningful statistical significant impact. And then if we want to make a prediction into the future, we can add another line item over here, net income minus interest expense or whatever, and plot that. And that should be pretty close to the red line if we have a good fit. But right now it's not the greatest fit. It's an okay fit, but it could be better. Let's look at one more chart. I think this is the last. Maybe there's one more. This is a spider chart. So it shows you 5 different metrics simultaneously. We see gross profit, 180 million for Apple, and for Tesla, 17 million. So tiny, right? This is magnitudes higher for operating income. Apple has 123. Tesla has 8 million for R&D, 31 million. Tesla has 4 million. So Apple's blowing away Tesla in every category here. Selling, general, and administrative expenses, 1.26 billion versus 5.1, and revenue 391 million versus 97 million for TTM revenue. So overall, based on my analysis here and 5 different experiments, I would say the merger makes sense. You're creating synergy. You're creating value by combining these two companies that aren't really competitors, but they have a common purpose for creating long-lasting, reliable, quick charging batteries, right? So that would be the synergistic focus or I guess goal for doing this merger, right? So again, I'm not going to go through every line item here, but some things to consider in this analysis and for future analysis is balance sheet metrics. We didn't look at the assets. We didn't look at any balance sheet. We just looked at the income statement. But to combine these and see if there's a synergy between these, that would be a worthwhile effort. Valuation metrics like market cap, price of earnings, price of sales. So we need the stock price. We need balance sheet items. We don't have that in here. We have the sales, right? We don't have price. We do have earnings. So we can do some of these growth metrics. We do have revenue growth and EBITDA, and that's what we did. We looked at that analysis. Dividend policy, we don't have the balance sheet side, so we don't have these metrics in there. But for future analysis, that would be worthwhile. And what else? Debt and leverage metrics, interest expense. We don't have the balance sheet. We can't do any of this stuff, but in the future, that would be nice to see. And free cash flow, capital expenditures, and tax expense. So I think we do have that, right? Free cash flow. Earnings per share. No, we don't have that. Sorry, that cash flows over here. So these are things that I would like to see. We could do this growth metrics because we have revenue and EBITDA. We don't have the valuation stuff. We don't have the balance sheet stuff. We have the debt. We don't have the other metrics. But it's just a matter of going back here and then getting this balance sheet. We would go to Apple Financials and get the balance sheet. So here's a different link, right? If we go down here, income statement, it's the first one. It doesn't say income statement. It just says financials. And if you go here to cash flows, it'll say Apple. And instead of financials, it says cash flow, right? So there's the cash flow. Here's the balance sheet. All right, look at the URL. And then here's the income statement. And then look at the URL. It goes back to financials. And if we want to go ahead and get the balance sheet and the cash flow statement, we would put that URL in here and run essentially the same type of analysis, right? Clicking this button, expand all, and same for Tesla. We replace financials with balance sheet and cash flows, and we would get that. So I didn't do the analysis. Again, it's just hypothetical. It's just running 5 different experiments and seeing how things shake out. That was the whole purpose of this analysis. And just to show you guys, the ins and outs, nuts and bolts of this stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, never worked in iBanking. I was close to that for many years. I have friends that did it. I did um, coaching and mentoring for people in this area, but I never did the hands-on stuff. So based on what I know, I think this is pretty close to a good synergy analysis, um, and what kind of synergies we can create by merging these two enterprises together. But again, some things could be coming up short because I don't have all the inside information that other people have in this. So if you have some comments, please share it in the comments section. If you have additional requests for similar but slightly different types of analysis that you'd like to see, send me that and I will take that into consideration. That's it for today, guys. I will wrap it up here. Thanks for your time. Hopefully, I was able to drop some knowledge and share my vision and my wisdom with you guys, and hopefully that was worthwhile for you as well. Right, there's the synergy. If I can help you guys become better off, we create synergies there. And if you can post some comments and help me get more insight into this area, I can make a more precise analysis, and that will create synergies for everybody as well. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for your time today. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.